Welcome, everybody. This is AllMinucOne, and my name is Bill. Please, if you enjoy my content, like, share, and subscribe. It will help me grow my channel and get the word out to other people. Also, if you like to be interactive and you want to see a live show, I do a live show with a co host and producer every Wednesday at 7 p.m. It's called The Ends Justify the Memes. It's a little bit of a loose show, it's mostly discussion and humor. And you can find us on DLive, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Wednesday, and we re upload later to YouTube. So, with all that said, let's talk about the VP pick, Kamala Harris. Now, I'm only covering this because I found this story interesting. And, not to be crass, but essentially, Kamala Harris is a token candidate to the Democrats because of all of their racialism, all of their obsession with people's ethnicities. They needed this character. And they happened to pick essentially a dark skinned Hillary Clinton. She might be even more cringe than Hillary Clinton is. So I just wanted to read a few things and show you a few things about her and her character. And I'm sure, you might already be aware. But just in case you're not, let's get into a little bit of a dive here. So this is from the Wall Street Journal. What Kamala Harris isn't saying about her mother's background. So this was written August 20th, 2020. So it's a very recent article. This is her mother here on the left. And it says, as we learn about Kamala Harris, we are also learning about her late mother. On the senator's website and in numerous speeches, Miss Harris traces her inspiration for fighting injustice to Kamala Gopalan. You guys have to forgive me with I'm terrible with names. I'm a little bit dyslexic, so it's new, and therefore I'm going to mess it up. But Kamala Gopalan, I believe, an Indian American immigrant activist and breast cancer researcher. In her speech to the Democratic National Convention Wednesday, Miss Harris called her mother, who died of cancer in 2009, the most important person in my life. As the story goes, Gopalan arrived in the U.S. as a 19-year-old student in 1958 and plunged into the civil rights movement in Berkeley, California, where she met the Jamaican-born economist Donald Harris. After a few years of marriage and 2 daughters, Gopalan and Mr. Harris divorced. In Miss Harris's 2019 book, The Truths We Hold, she credits her Indian-born mother with ensuring that Miss Harris and her sisters would grow into confident, proud black women. For many Americans, Kamala Gopalan's immigrant story is a heartwarming part of famous politicians' biography. But Miss Harris's mother also figures in another tale told less often of India's small, successful Tamale Brahmin diaspora. Now, the reason why this article covers this, and it's important, is because when you play up to socialist and intersectionality, everything is about race and gender and sexual orientation or your abledness, if you're disabled or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I'm short, so I think I'm short abled or tall disabled. I don't know. But it always plays up to your weaknesses. And this article is going to highlight the strengths of where Kamala Harris comes from and her background and her mother's heritage versus what she wants to present to you now and her far left progressive beliefs. And it's just pandering, people. That's all it is. It's just pandering to get your vote because she thinks you're stupid. So, originating in Tamil Nadu on the southern tip of India subcontinent, Tamil Brahmins, known colloquially as Tamborams, are thought to number fewer than 2 million worldwide. Though precise numbers don't exist, scholars estimate the group's size in the U.S. at about 50,000, a small fraction of the 4 million strong Indian American community. Another 50,000 are scattered into other countries, including the UK, Canada, and Australia. Like most Indian Americans, Tambrams are relatively recent immigrants. Most come to the U.S. after Congress eased immigration rules in 1965. But they have produced 2 Nobel laureates in the sciences, a clutch of prominent business leaders, including former PepsiCo CEO Andara Nuyui and Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, and too many prominent doctors, engineers, and academics to count. What explains this? To begin with, historically, Tambrams occupied the pinnacle of society and the Tamil-speaking region in southern India. As hereditary Hindu priests, they benefited from the centuries of literacy, and many were significant landowners as well. Under British rule, the community quickly took to English education. Over time, many Tambrams rose to occupy trusted positions in the colonial government, where they developed a reputation for probity and for being sticklers for rules. Others took to modern professions such as law, engineering, and medicine. Now, this article will go on with this and some background to this culture. If you read people who examine culture on the level of economics, such as Thomas Sowell, you will see that people from different ethnic cultures do better than others because of a certain cultural mindset. The idea to work and strive hard. And we know cross-culturally, those people who work and strive hard, regardless of how intelligent they are, their work ethic essentially dictates how successful they end up being. So those people that work hard tend to be the most successful. If you work constantly, if you're very conscientious, according to the Big Five personality, and on top of that, you have a higher IQ. You don't have to have a super high IQ, but at least above average, so 115 to the 120 area, you're going to do really, really well. And the social, the SJW, the social justice warriors, and the neo-Marxist and the postmodernist want to tell you, no, it's all about oppression in your race. But unfortunately, this doesn't take into account the Indian Americans that live in the United States or elsewhere in the West that are the top income earners of all demographics. It also doesn't take into account modern Nigerian immigrants, who themselves, obviously from Nigeria, are black, are one of the top income earners when you break it down to that specific nationality and their ethnicities versus other groups of blacks or other groups of Asians. So you have to understand that there is a huge cultural influence here. It has far more to do with that than it does with race or ethnicity. So moving on. In the 20th century, as political and economic upheaval drove Tamil Brahmins from towns and villages to cities, the communities developed a cult of learning. So M.R. Ragheswamy, a California-based technology investor who founded Indiaspora, an advocacy group that seeks strong U.S.-Indian relationships, recalls growing up in Madras in the 1960s and 70s in a Tamil Brahmin community that revered the mathematic genius of another Indian name. I'm probably just going to skip the names. Just for the flow of it, you're going to have to read this yourself, unless you want to hear me stutter and stammer everywhere, rather than the usual movie stars. So basically, they revered the mathematician rather than the movie stars. Actually, this is very common in Russian culture as well. Some often like geniuses, scientists, whatever, engineers are revered over here in the American continent, where we look at movie stars like Billie Eilish, for instance, is telling people to vote Democrat. Like, I give a crap about what Billie Eilish has to say about politics. I mean, anyways, Mrs. Noyi credits her success to corporate America to her strict and frugal Tamili Brahmin upbringing in Madras. In a phone interview, she recalls a community for which education was everything. Children weren't allowed to be even 5 minutes late for school or to talk back to elders. Grandfathers supplemented homework with extra math problems and spelling tests. As a conservative, Tamil Brahmins, you can forget about fashion or having a social life, said Ms. Noyi. When you were studying, you were focused on classical music and dance and on reading as much as you possibly could. Now, if we look at other Asian cultures that do really well, such as South Koreans, the Japanese, and many of the Chinese ethnic groups that move to the United States, you will find a very similar trend. This is why these people are overrepresented in colleges. It is also why the colleges trying to use affirmative action have essentially made them have to have a 200-point lead on their SATs to get in versus people of other ethnic minorities. And that, my friends, is just pure and simple racism. You can say that these other people didn't have the start that they deserved when they were younger, and perhaps that is true. But you do not correct that on the back end by putting them into colleges that they are not prepared for either. There are other ways to go about that, such as probably charter schools, school choice, letting the parents control more and less bureaucracy, less teacher unions, those kind of things. How about preparatory schools? When I was in the Marine Corps, I had considered going into the Naval Academy. I had the potential to do so, given my command was willing to work with me, but I had never taken an SAT because I knew I was going in the military. And I couldn't find anything to do SAT prep, and I had been out of school for over 2 years, and so couldn't remember a lot of basic things with mathematics and whatever. So I decided not to do it. I opted out. It was probably not a good decision. It was probably a mistake. I probably should have went to the Naval Academy and become a Marine Corps officer. I would have had a degree in science and engineering and would have had a different life. But that's the way it goes. And when I got out of the Marine Corps and I went to college, I had to take remedial courses. But as the first course that I took in mathematics was do it at your own pace. And I quickly found out through reading the books that, oh yeah, I remember all this stuff. It came back to me, and I finished the course in 2 weeks. And I came back for the final, and which, was whatever it was, 10 weeks later, and I got a 90 on my test. So again, I didn't have enough confidence in myself and in my ability to prep. But my point being is that that there are ways to go to these prep schools and stuff like that, and had I taken an SAT, I may have gotten into a prep school for the Naval Academy and gone there, and my life would be a different thing. So my whole point is that there are other ways to do this other than to basically racially discriminate against groups who do well. So, continuing back to the text. In her book, Ms. Harris airbrushes her mother's community from her story. The words Tamil and Brahmin don't appear at all. At one point, the senator mentions that Golapan won an award for her singing in India, but not that it was for Carnatic music, a classical art form closely associated with Tamil Brahmins. At one level, this omission is understandable. The senator is a U.S. politician appealing to American voters. She has no obligation to know about her mother's ancestral community, much less to recount its story. But the story also undercuts many of the pieties of the U.S. left. How do you characterize America as a land of oppression when so many immigrants have clearly experienced it as a land of opportunity? Especially in her mother's day, when India was essentially still in communism or just coming out of communism. the Indian policies that spurred Tambram migration also offered a cautionary tale. So here we go. I hadn't read this whole article, guys, by the way. So, when I'm speaking off the cuff on all of this. Socialism adopted at independence in 1947 created so few jobs that within 2 decades, educated Indians began streaming to the West. Even today, the middle class dream for many Indians begin with immigrating. And that is true. That is true. Even though India is slowly rising itself out of poverty, doing much, much better, it's still a huge country, very wild, very lawless in many parts. And obviously they have 1 billion people. So to put that in perspective, yeah, there's 1 billion people in China. The United States has 328 million that we know of. This is probably closer to 350, I think, with illegal immigration. But so we have a third of 1 billion, and all of the continent of Africa has 1 billion people. And Africa is a huge, huge continent. So add to this the pitfalls of identity politics. Beginning in the early 20th century, the anti-Brahmanism became a hallmark of the Tamil politics. Numerically large caste Brahmins accounted for only 2.5% of the population, mobilized on the basis of group identity. In the 1960s, they introduced sweeping quotas in education and government employment that forced many Tambrams to seek opportunities elsewhere. So, because of identity politics and because of things like their caste system and whatever else, these people, they had been doing so well historically that they pointed the finger, much like is going on now. And when I talk about communism, I talk about it over and over again, and nearly every video I make, it is the same story over and over again. Wake up and smell the coffee, people. This is what is happening in the United States right now. And if you are voting for Democrats in any way, shape, or form, I'm even talking about the moderate Democrats because they all in the end fall in line. If you are doing that at the moment, you are endorsing this. Whether you are doing it consensually or not, or whether you don't think so or not, you are literally endorsing this. And I hate to say vote Republican because I really am not about this two-party system either. But find out who your Republicans are and do not vote in the neocons because they will just let it happen. They will. I promise you. They have no backbone. You need to get with people that are like Senator Rand Paul that'll stand up and do a filibuster all by himself for 2 or 3 days straight. But most of the politicians out there aren't like that. You know, I didn't really like Ted Cruz, but here lately, man, he's been on a little bit of a tear. There's a few people. I cannot stand, at least historically, Lindsey Graham. But man, after he's kind of walked back a little bit. But after the Kavanaugh thing, man, did he nut up a little bit? Did he get some cojones? You know, but I wouldn't be voting him in. Personally, I would try to primary him. I'd try to primary our governor here in West Virginia because he's just a neocon. In any case, it says the identity entrepreneurs who dominated Tamil Nadu politics justify reverse discrimination. 7 in 10 college admissions and government jobs in the state have long been filled using quotas on grounds of historical grievance. It's undeniable that the Tambrams have advantages, and many of their ancestors held views about social hierarchy that rightly graded our modern sensibilities. Nonetheless, the community's marginalization and migration is also a textbook example of the folly of pushing identity politics too far. As the Democratic Convention wraps up, many more Americans will have learned about the remarkable woman who raised Miss Harris and her younger sister, Maya. They also deserve to learn the lesson of the community in which the Kamala Galapan was born. And so, again, the point of this article is about how these things took place in India. Kamala Harris says her mother's very, very important, but she will not tell you about her mother's true history, the history of her family on her mother's side. And her mother was, I believe, a cancer researcher. Her father's an economist. So I'm more than certain that her parents, being the educated people that they were, talked about this in great lengths to her. But she denies this and hides this because if the truth gets out there, then she cannot pander. She cannot pander to the stupid, woke-skulled people. So, next, and I'm not going to get into this as far as reading the article, but I just want to bring this up. This is from the American Thinker. Now, this is old. This is from last year. But this is about Kamala Harris's relationship with Willie Brown and essentially how she slept her way to the top to get it. Willie Brown was the mayor of San Francisco. He says, yes, we dated. It was more than 20 years ago. Yes, I have influenced her career by appointing her to 2 state commissions when I was an assembly speaker. And I certainly helped her first race for district attorney in San Francisco. I've also helped her careers of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom, who is a nightmare for California right now, Dianne Feinstein, and a host of other politicians. Those are 3 names of politicians I absolutely despise. Those are people that only care about their power and their ego. Excuse me. So, again, I'm not going to read this whole thing. You can find this. I'm only bringing this up because this shows you about the morality, how deep her morality is. Now, we could say the same thing about Donald Trump. I mean, you know, Donald Trump was obviously a billionaire playboy and whatever else. But, you know, he's kind of a populist, mostly a populist. But more than anything, like I said, what I like about him is he's anti-globalist. He doesn't want to continue and perpetuate global war. He's been against the war in Iraq from the beginning. Joe Biden has lied about that, by the way. He's talked about, I was against the war in Iraq. No, actually, he was very, very much pro-Iraq. But these people think that you are stupid. And so the reason why I do bring this up is because people will point fingers to Trump and then say nothing about Kamala Harris on this. Now, people on the right will point to Kamala Harris. To me, I point fingers at both of them. And in the end, it's about look at the policies and look at how they act. Now, Trump is not a politician. Trump was a businessman. And he's also had a lot of trouble here because of the neocons and the neolibs trying to block him from doing anything. So here is a little story. I'm not going to play this whole thing, but it's from Vice. And then we'll look at an article about this from this young man who was sentenced to prison, who was innocent by Kamala Harris.
Never in a million years I would have thought that they were going to charge me for Sales murder. I never talked to no detective, no police officer, no DA, nobody.
Just arrested and then charged.
Arrested and charged, that's it.
Was the first time you saw Kamala Harris in person the day that the verdict was issued?
She showed up at the 2 most pivotal times in this first trial, and me being convicted and me being sentenced. She wanted to be present for a celebration of a conviction.
That's what it felt like, celebration?
A celebration, that's what it felt like. The reactions I get when I tell people my story is, they say it's the worst nightmare. You know, it's the closest thing to dying.
Jamal?
No, this came out back in October. Go check it out. You can go find it on YouTube. This is Vice. Here is the article that is linked in the YouTube's description. It says, Dirty Cops, a bogus eyewitness, years of violent prison, and a liberal politician whose star keeps rising. And now these people will back Kamala Harris. Again, this was October 2019. You can read this article. I don't need to go through all this. It's pretty simple. We know that there was an innocent man on death row. There are many things. Tulsi Gabbard called her out on this. Here's what I find ridiculous. Now, I if you watch this, you know, nothing against this gentleman, but he doesn't seem like a very educated man. But this is a person, to me, without any deep thought or principle when I play this, because I can guarantee you, if I was locked up and innocent and I had a politician basically deny evidence and whatever else they did, running for vice president, I would be 1,000% against them. But here he says, we must get Trump out of office. Why, dude? Why? No one has signed legislation in years to reduce prison sentences and let people out of jail for smaller petty crimes. Trump did prison reform. Unemployment for the black community was historical under Trump until the Democrats decided they were going to do these crazy lockdowns. It's not all Democrats. I mean, there's still lockdowns, obviously, in some Republican states. But you have states like in Maryland where the Republican governor is dealing with a Democratic legislature, and many Democratic voters in the portions of Maryland like Baltimore County and PG County, Montgomery County, that basically run the whole state because that's where the population is. Here in West Virginia, we have a weird mix of conservatism with Democratic voters. But we were something like 70% Trump, and at least in my area, I see pro-Trump stuff everywhere. But anyways, I'm going to play this gentleman's message, and to me, this is just absolutely garbage. He has no principles.
So look, I know everybody want to hear my opinion about Kamala Harris being picked as VP, and really it's simple. My reservations with her is not bigger than what this election is. We got to get Donald Trump and his whole administration out of office.
Why? Justify yourself.
And we have our two candidates right now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as VP. And we got to get behind it. You know, I know some people might think, you know, that it is hard, right? Because things been said, people look at it like this, like.
It isn't hard. It's as simple as this, man. It's as simple as this. The situation with the black community has been getting better under Trump. Trump was calling out like Baltimore and other places that are absolute trash. And I can tell you, man, like I said, I grew up in Maryland. I've been to Baltimore many times. I used to have to go down there for work all the time. Baltimore is a rough place. Unless you're like on the north side and a little bit of suburbia or right in the inner harbor, Baltimore is dilapidated. It is ghetto. It is horrible. And they've been ruled by Democrats for 60 years.
Like that. Hey, you seen during the primaries, all of these candidates going after each other, and you stood with who you wanted to go with, who you wanted to go with, who you wanted to go with. At the end of the day, you can't be a sore loser. Your candidate didn't make it there. My candidate didn't make it there. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to get behind the candidate that is in front of us, and that's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So if you wanted my answer and you wanted, you know, if you thought you was going to get something else, hey, you must not know me enough. At the end of the day, I'm going to say it again. At the end of the day, I'm not going to fall into that Trump trick bag, and I suggest you don't either. Y'all make sure, man, y'all go and rock the vote for Biden and for Kamala.
What Trump trick bag? You have cities burning down right now, riots in Portland, murders going on. A guy was shot the other day and paralyzed right in front of his wife. Another numerous murders, broad daylight, drive-bys in New York City, all Democratic-controlled areas. We know that Chicago has a long history of corruption and Democratic politicians. Like, I don't understand why you people can't get your heads out of the sand, why you can't open your eyes and understand what has been going on in this country forever. And again, I'm not sitting here being like, yeah, Republicans, yay, vote Republican. I'm not at all. I'm just saying we finally have someone in the White House that isn't playing these games. The closest thing we've had to this in years was Reagan, and before that it was JFK, and you know what happened to JFK. And they tried to do the same thing to Reagan. So, like, let's be real here, people. There is a political machine, a left-right machine that gives you a false dichotomy. It is absolutely a false dichotomy. And those two pillars, those neocons, those neolibs, are just going to keep moving us leftward into progressivism until everything falls apart. Look at Detroit. Detroit has been a dilapidated crap city for years. We can look at Ferguson. Like I said, look at all of the places in which have not been doing well. We go to the history of New York City, our largest city, and we can see that once Giuliani came in, law and order started, and the city became beautified and gentrified. But gentrified is a bad word today. Gentrified is a bad word. Taking dilapidated areas, projects that are falling apart, and whatever else, and modernizing them and making them nice and putting businesses and shops in them, that's bad? Like, what is wrong with you? This is like absolutely why I have so much disgust for commies. So much. Like, you're literally just horrible people. You know, and I hate to be so brazen because I don't want to be mean. But there's just a reality here, people. There is a reality to life. When you work hard, like Kamala Harris's mother and her people, when you work hard, you do well. When you are young and you work hard, you invest in your future. As Jocko Willink says, discipline equals freedom. And I can tell you, nobody that lacks discipline has true, authentic freedom. And unfortunately, this guy is still on that Democratic plantation, believes in whatever nonsense lies because he doesn't do his research. And like I said, he doesn't seem like an ultra smart fellow. And you know, and that's where he gets my sympathy because he just hasn't figured it out. So I'm going to play for you one last thing here. And this is from Reason. This was just released the other day. And I'm going to go ahead and let the whole thing roll.
Before Senator and former Attorney General of California Kamala Harris was chosen as Joe Biden's running mate in the 2020 election, she played a role in a campaign to force a website called Backpage.com to stop operating on the grounds that it was used to facilitate sex trafficking.
Backpage.com needs to shut itself down when it has created as its business model the profiting off the selling of human beings and the purchase of human beings. Good businesses such as Craigslist understood how it could be abused and mishandled, and they shut that aspect of their business model down. Backpage needs to do the same.
We didn't kowtow. We don't kowtow.
It would give the lie to our entire lives, our entire career of being journalists, if the government could come in and put their stubby little fingers in our chest and make us ask for our mommy. It ain't gonna happen.
In the course of her prosecution of Backpage's founders, Michael Lacey and James Larkin, Harris spread misinformation about its practices. She co-filed criminal charges that were quickly dismissed but succeeded at garnering headlines and photo ops that raised her political profile. In reality, Backpage.com had become a powerful tool for law enforcement to catch sex traffickers because of the cooperation and commitment of the site's founders to the cause, whom Harris and many other state attorneys general and politicians had painted as villains.
Backpage.com is nothing more than a front for pimps and child sex traffickers.
To stop this online child sex trafficking that's being facilitated by sites such as this.
See, do you understand what they do here, right? Again, people will die or think of the children. That's what's going on there. That was two Republicans. Like I said, I'm not fans of either one of them. But people will die or think of the children. And they just said that Backpage was working with law enforcement.
Harris had supported anti-sex trafficking bills when she was district attorney of San Francisco, but it was in October 2016, after she was elected California Attorney General, that she co-filed criminal charges against Lacey and Larkin, as well as Backpage CEO Carl Farrar. Though accused of running a website used by sex traffickers, the charges were quickly tossed out because Lacey and Larkin were clearly protected by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, known as the Internet's First Amendment, which says that an online platform isn't responsible for many types of content posted by its customers. According to Lacey and Larkin, the charges were so thin there was no reason to file them, except as a stunt to raise her public profile.
She does this right before the election. And inside the courtroom, there was a jail cell. They filmed us in the jail cell and then broadcast it on the evening news.
So Harris gets to have her name in all the papers right before the election, saying that she's the one who helped take down these people that everyone for years has been characterizing as these big evil sex traffickers. It was a publicity stunt.
Lacey and Larkin spent 4 days in a Sacramento jail.
She knew that Section 230 barred her from bringing these charges, but she brought them anyway. And of course, a judge threw them right out.
So Harris filed another set of charges against.
Do you see how the game is played? Do you understand that none of this is sincere? Do you see what's going on here?
Against the 3 men.
Harris was trying to say that Farrar and Lacey and Larkin, by virtue of having this site and knowing that sometimes, bad things happen there, that they were guilty. These other pimping charges later get dismissed too.
Journalist Elizabeth Nolan Brown writes about sex workers in the criminal justice system, and she's been covering the lawsuit against Backpage, which recently got rescheduled to 2021 because of COVID-19. Brown revealed secret Justice Department memos showing prosecutors spent years trying to build a child sex trafficking case against Backpage, but failed to uncover compelling evidence of criminal intent or pattern or reckless conduct regarding minors. Instead, Justice Department officials found Backpage was remarkably responsive to law enforcement requests and proactively sent ads containing minors to authorities. The memos revealed a world far outside the characterization Harris and other politicians, attorneys general.
So again, instead of working, which law enforcement was, but instead of the prosecutors working with them and getting maybe sting operations with this company to stop this, they just wanted to put somebody out in the public and say, blame these people who aren't even responsible for what they're doing. Now, would they do this to a newspaper? You can put your little ad in a newspaper and someone can respond to it. Would they do that? Probably not. Now, Craigslist probably stopped doing this just because they didn't want to have the hassle of their personal ads being prosecuted. But this is just politicians making themselves up front and present, making themselves like acting like they're doing something. Because most of the time they don't need to do anything. And that's the big secret, the big lie. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to happen, and they need to seem useful. They need to seem to be proactive. So they have to find something to fight. This is why we have a global war on terrorism. This is why we have a drug war. This is why we have a lot of stuff. Well, the drug war actually started because Nixon didn't like hippies, and for some other reasons, but yeah.
General and activists had been pushing for years about Backpage.
To be clear, this is a crime. It is a crime that is rightly punishable by incarceration in prison.
On January 10, 2017, Harris, who had been elected the junior senator from California, participated in hearings on Backpage.
These individuals must be held accountable. These allegations must be given voice. And we have to do all that is right to make sure that we as a civil society protect always the most vulnerable among us and not take advantage of them, assuming nobody will care. These hearings have made clear we care.
But as Harris and other senators characterized Backpage as complicit in sex trafficking, Justice Department memos reveal law enforcement officers the country over were working with Backpage employees, taking seminars on how to use the site from Backpage lawyers, and coming to rely on the site for sex trafficking investigations. A 2012 memo described the Backpage data as a goldmine of information for investigators.
So many different people put on this huge show of making them the villain in this. A lot of people in government actively made the calculation to make life more dangerous for both sex workers and sex trafficking victims in order to satisfy this crusade that they were on publicly.
On April 6, 2018, the FBI raided the homes of Lacey and Larkin and accused them of running a website that facilitated prostitution. Their trial is scheduled to take place in January 2021.
It's hard to make us feel guilty.
We're
okay?
not guilty.
We're not
That's
guilty.
fucking
Okay, you can't talk me into it.
It's an evergreen political issue. Always works. They're waiting to be governors or senators, presidents. That's what that was all about.
Look at me. Look at what I'm doing to help out the child sex trafficking. Well, are you going after Hollywood? Have you seen the hashtags that were banned on Facebook about sex trafficking? Like, this is a big issue, people, but I don't think, and I haven't done my research on these guys, but I'm going to take Reason's word for it. They're usually pretty good. Here we have, this is an interesting one I'm not going to bring up, but here we have It
is Kamala Harris.
Presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden has picked California Senator Kamala Harris as.
So we have the drug war, the vice cop, and the draconian prosecutor. So my whole point in all this, and probably many of you watching already know, is that, this is not an authentic person. This is not a person that is good for the nation in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, Joe Biden, God bless his soul, is absolutely demented. Like, there's no doubt about it. And that is who, if elected, will be the president. Now, I'm very under the belief that there are many, many voters that are keeping quiet because they don't want to be attacked, who are going to be voting for Trump. But then I also see, and again, I don't get on social media a lot, but I also see, people on social media with their heads in the sand, their eyes closed or up something else, and not aware of what's going on, trying to blame things on other people. It's like the guy I spoke with the other day briefly that was trying to say that all the riots and all the things were Trump's fault, and he didn't see this during the Obama administration. I'm like, oh, okay. So Baltimore, Ferguson, BLM didn't start then. Occupy Wall Street, the Anaheim riots, Oakland riots. What else? What other places do you want me to talk about? There wasn't a shooting of Steve Scalise, that was, I believe that was still under Obama. Who was the other person in Texas, the lady that was in Congress? I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Look, left-wing violence has been happening in the United States for quite a long time and escalating for quite a long time. And the reality is that the media likes to keep it quiet, and then they always want to say, it's the far right, it's the far right. There was something like, Brandon Struck talked about this the other day on the Tim Pool IRL podcast. There was something like, back in the 50s or 60s or whatever it was, 150 Americans, something like that, and 150 million in the United States. And of that, 4 million were part of the KKK. 4 million. Small percentage, but still quite a bit. There is 328 million Americans, 330 million, citizens in the United States today. And there are only about 12,000 members of racist, what are considered far right groups. And I can tell you they're not right wing at all, because they're all socialist. Fascists are socialist. Like, get that straight, get that into your head, because that is the reality. Read some books on it, read the economics, read what they have to say, see where Giovanni Gentili and Mussolini got fascism from, look at Franco's Spain, and quit pointing only to the Nazis. The Nazis were not the only fascist regime out there. And I will say this now, that China is very much a fascist regime. It has a sort of capitalist economy that is centrally controlled. We have a very soft form of corporate fascism in the United States. A largely free market, but it's not a free market. So anyways, I can ramble on forever, people. It's why my videos are so long. But I appreciate you sticking with me. If you like this content, please hit that like button. Share and subscribe. Help me grow. Go check me out on DLive Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Ends Justify Memes. YouTube channel is The Ends Justify the Memes. And again, it's a much lighter show. We do talk about serious subjects, but it's a lot of laughs. It's a lot of fun. And that's a live show you can watch, again, over on DLive. So with that, this has been AllMinucOne. My name is Bill, and hey, today's Saturday, guys. I got a video out on Saturday. I'm going to watch some UFC fights here in a little bit and drink a couple beers and eat some munchies. And I hope you all have a good weekend. Have a good rest of your weekend. If you're working, be thankful that you still have a job right now in this crazy, crazy time. So, with all that said, be well.